Kenya and the IMF are negotiating a new standby loan after the old one expired in September. When do you anticipate negotiations will conclude, and what are you looking for?
We don't have a timeline for conclusion of the negotiations. We have been negotiating, and actually now that we were in Washington just last week, we discussed the general direction on this. So we don't have a specific timeline. We expect it to be concluded in the next few months. But I think that's just our expectation in light of the things that we still need clarity on our side and also on the IMF side.
What kind of size are you looking for, given that you're also going to go to market with another $2 billion bond sale yourselves? Will the two conflict?
The details of the arrangements are still being worked out. But basically, in general terms, we would have something perhaps aligned to what we had before. So we had something like $2 billion US, the equivalent of that. And but the point is, the general parameters of this program would be first a precautionary arrangement. So it's not a disbursing arrangement. It's really insurance in light of the risks that are around now in the global market. So it's really to be used only in a case of significant shocks that we cannot deal with in the usual ways. So it's really more a rainy day kind of package. That's really the one thing that we are very clear about. Now, like any other IMF program, there would be specific policies that support it. And this is something that we are trying to do, meaning have ownership on the program, ownership on the policies that support it. And I think that's really what we are discussing. There's no rush in terms of balance of payments need that we can see in the short term and indeed also in the medium term.
Governor, as Vonnie says, though, that you do have an upcoming Eurobond sale. I think it's the third one. And I'm curious as to whether or not you think there will be an effect on pricing if that IMF arrangement is in place or not in place. So I'm curious as to your thinking on the timing of both the transaction with the IMF and how that will subsequently go on and affect the Eurobond sale.
I cannot say too much about the Eurobond sale because of the usual strictures around confidentiality and so forth until the announcements are made. But the one thing I would say is the Eurobond that we are thinking of has been already anticipated in the budget. And really this is trying to roll over the financing that has been there, that the previous Eurobond that is expiring sometime in June. So I think the point here is that it will not lead to new additional financing, net financing, but rather just lengthening the maturity, as it were, or refinancing of the Eurobond that are maturing.
You bring up the issue of the budgets. Kenya currently runs an expansionary budget. Is that sustainable? A year ago, the outcome in terms of the fiscal deficit was something like 9.3% of GDP. And that was a year that we had significant problems in terms of the drought and also the double elections that we had, presidential and national elections that we had then. Last fiscal year, the deficit came down to around 7.2% of GDP. And this year, we are aiming for something in the order of 6.3. So the point is that the deficit there has to be significant consolidation in the government accounts, in the fiscal accounts. And this is what that decline in the deficit is showing. In the long term, we expect, and the expectation here is anchored in our medium-term program, we expect the deficit to be around 3% of GDP. The question, though, is obviously the implementation of that plan. And this is where I think the fiscal authorities, the National Treasury, has been working to operationalize or to implement, to ensure that the
the deficit targets actually materialize.
Governor, inflation has remained within the band, which is 2.5% to 7.5%. You mentioned the drought. How big of a risk is it? Could it push inflation beyond that?
The drought I mentioned was a few years ago.
Another drought?
Yeah, so it's true today there is some concern about the potential for another drought because the rains have delayed, the long rains. But we are still not sure. Maybe there will be the rain. This is still, there is a chance that it could go either way. Nevertheless, the impact of the drought that we had, the last drought in 2017, was a decline in agriculture. The general, a 5-year average for agriculture is around 5%, the growth of agriculture. And actually in that year, it only grew by about 1%. So there was a significant decline in agriculture. Now, the impact also was on inflation. There was also, it pushed up food prices. But we managed to keep it within just only for a few months was it outside that band. So in some sense, we believe that we can contain the inflationary impact if that were to happen. The significant impact will be on growth, which will be a loss of growth by about 1 percentage point. In this current year, calendar year, we are projecting growth of 6.3%. So if indeed we have a very severe drought, it may come down to about 1 percentage point less than that, so 5.3% or something like that. There will be impact also on the current account, but we think we can manage that as well.
Well, the other concern is the shilling, the currency. Now, the IMF has said it's overvalued by 17% and that potentially the central bank is propping it up. Where do you see fair value for the shilling?
First, we do not agree with the IMF's assessment, and we have been very explicit with that. So we believe that there were mistakes in their calculation. Our view is very simple, that the shilling is valued fairly. We do not prop it up. As a matter of fact, our exchange rate policy is very simple. We have a flexible exchange rate. We do not target a rate or direction. But the only thing we do is to intervene to reduce volatility. And that is something that is standard in terms of intervening to reduce volatility. The point is that the FX market has been very balanced. As a matter of fact, the current account over the last 4 years, in 2014, it was around 10.4%. And that has come down. Last year, we had a current account deficit of 4.7%. And we expect this year, 2019, a current account deficit of about 4.9%, which is where we expect it to be over the medium term. So you can see that has led to significant, let's say, balance in the FX market, which is why the shilling has remained quite stable. Even though ourselves, we don't have a view about where the shilling should be.
Governor, final quick question. Does Kenya need more bank consolidation?
That is true. It does need more consolidation. We have indicated that. And actually, bank consolidation is taking place. What we did not do is to have forced consolidation. We believe that that is dangerous. And what we have been seeing is a sort of market-driven consolidation. There has been some consolidation, and we expect that to continue. What is most important here is that the banks are beginning on or have already begun on a journey of strengthening their business operations, meaning being more, improving their business models so as to be more resilient, and also changing the way they behave with regard to customers. One of the things that we are very clear about is the banks need to be much more customer-centric. And that is something that we have already begun. And indeed, the other things that they need to do in terms of the processes, being more transparent. This is really the reforms that we are pushing in the banking sector. Of course, if it happens in Kenya, it will be beneficial to the other jurisdictions where the Kenyan banks are also operating. So this is really something that is very positive, and we are watching it closely.